They think time will make you forget that your silence means peace. But let's be real. What they did in the dark was a choice, a deliberate, cold decision. And here's what I need you to understand. Some things are unforgivable. Not because you're bitter, not because you're weak, but because you finally found your worth. Because you now know what it means to protect your peace, your boundaries, your heart. See, forgiveness isn't always about healing. Sometimes it's used to gaslight you into submission, to make you feel guilty for bleeding from wounds they created, but no more. You're not here to carry their shame. You're not here to keep recycling trauma in the name of being the bigger person. You are here to grow, to build, to thrive, and you do that by never letting them rewrite the truth, never letting them walk away clean while you sit in silence. What they did in the dark, it doesn't stay there. It echoes. And now the echo is your voice. The echo is your success. You don't need revenge. You don't even need closure. Your growth is the closure. Your boundaries are the justice. You are no longer a victim of their choices. You're the author of your own power. And that power begins when you stop explaining, stop apologizing, and stop forgiving the unforgivable. Because some things deserve to be remembered. Not so you can stay angry, but so you never allow yourself to be disrespected like that again. Ever. They knew exactly what they were doing. Don't let anyone tell you it was just a bad moment or an accident. No, it was calculated. It was cold. It was a decision made when they thought no one was watching. But the thing about the dark is, it doesn't erase accountability. The dark just exposes who someone really is when they're no longer performing. They planned it. They chose it. And that matters, because when you minimize it, when you excuse it, you teach yourself to accept the unacceptable. You begin to doubt your own reality. But the truth is, why they didn't trip and fall into betrayal. They walked into it with eyes wide open. And if you don't name that, if you don't own that truth, you risk allowing the same pattern back into your life in a different disguise. This isn't about holding a grudge, it's about holding the line. It's about recognizing that trust, loyalty, and love are not toys to be played with behind closed doors. What they did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. And now, your choice is to stop pretending it wasn't. Because healing doesn't begin with denial. It begins with brutal, unapologetic honesty. They didn't just slip. They didn't just mess up. They chose to lie. They chose to manipulate. They chose to hurt you while wearing a smile. And that decision didn't come out of weakness. It came from arrogance. From the belief that they could get away with it, that you wouldn't notice, that even if you did, you'd stay quiet, that you'd forgive them like always. That's what they were betting on. Your loyalty, your kindness, your heart. But here's the truth that changes everything. It wasn't an accident, it was a test of your boundaries, a test of your strength. And while they were busy playing games in the dark, they didn't realize one thing. You were waking up. See, when someone betrays you in silence, in secrecy, it's not just the act that cuts deep, it's the insult to your intelligence, your spirit, your trust. They looked you in the eye and still went behind your back. That is not a moment of weakness. That's a character flaw. And you don't heal by pretending it didn't happen. You don't grow by covering their darkness with your light. You grow by shining so bright that their shadows can no longer touch you. Understand this. People reveal themselves in moments they think don't matter. And those moments are the loudest truth you'll ever hear. So don't gaslight yourself. Don't justify it. Don't shrink your intuition to keep others comfortable. What they did in the dark, you saw it. You felt it. And you have every right to never forget it, never excuse it, and never open the same door to that level of disrespect again. Because once someone shows you who they are when no one's watching, believe them, and then walk away with your head high because now you're watching you, and you're never letting it happen again. There are some lines that once crossed change everything. Some betrayals don't just sting, they shatter the foundation of who you thought someone was. And let's be clear, not everything deserves forgiveness. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. Because when you forgive someone who has no remorse, who has shown no growth, who has turned your pain into their convenience, you're not being strong, you're being used. You're being conditioned to abandon your own dignity in the name of peace. But peace that costs you yourself? That's not peace, that's surrender. This isn't about holding on to hate. This is about holding on to truth. Because the world will try to guilt you into forgiveness. Be the bigger person, they'll say. Let it go, it's in the past. But they weren't there, were they? They didn't see what it did to your heart at 2 a.m. They didn't witness the anxiety, the self-doubt, the cracks in your spirit. So don't let someone who wasn't burned tell you how long to feel the fire. Their actions so low, so intentional, so dehumanizing that to forgive them too soon, or worse, to fake forgiveness, is to betray yourself a second time. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is the one you give to yourself. The decision to walk away without forgiving because that's what self-respect demands. Forgiveness can be beautiful, but it must be earned. It must come after accountability, after change, after proof, not after excuses, not after silence, not after manipulation. If they can't look you in the eye and own the damage, then they're not asking for forgiveness. They're asking for another chance to hurt you, and you are no longer available for that. Some things are unforgivable, not because your heart is closed, but because your eyes are finally open. There's a dangerous myth out there that forgiveness is always the answer. That to evolve, to heal, to rise, you must forgive everyone who ever harmed you. But let's break that illusion right now, because real growth isn't about spiritual bypassing. It's not about slapping a smile on your face while you bleed inside. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, I don't forgive you. Not because you're bitter, not because you're stuck in anger, but because what was done crossed a boundary so sacred it should never be normalized. You see, when someone intentionally manipulates, lies, deceives, or violates you, and they do it while knowing the trust you placed in them, that's not a mistake. That's a message. A message that says, you don't matter. And if you're the kind of person who always rushes to forgive, always softens, always folds just to keep the peace, then you're teaching people that you'll tolerate anything as long as they throw the word sorry into the wind. But sorry without transformation is just another weapon. It's an illusion designed to drag you back into the cycle. And you're not here to spin in circles. You're here to elevate. Forgiveness is sacred. It's not something you give because people expect it. It's not a badge of honor for those who've never done the work to deserve it. And in some cases, withholding forgiveness is the exact boundary you need to protect your sanity, your self-worth, your future, because if you forgive too soon, too easily, too freely, you end up betraying the only person who never left you, yourself. So no, not everything deserves forgiveness. Not every sin can be washed away by time and sweet words. Some scars were carved with too much intent. Some wounds must remain remembered, not to keep you angry, but to keep you awake, to remind you who they really were when no one was looking, and who you became when you finally stopped looking away. Forgiveness is your choice, not your obligation. And when it comes to what they did in the dark, your power isn't in pretending it didn't happen. Your power is in making sure it never happens again. Just because you're silent doesn't mean you're healed. Just because you haven't spoken about it doesn't mean it didn't destroy a part of you. Silence is often mistaken for peace, but let's get something straight. Silence can also be survival. It can be the space where you pick up the pieces of what they shattered without making a sound. And while they walk around thinking they got away with it, you're sitting in the storm they created, quietly, strongly, alone. People love to misread your silence. They think you're weak. They think you've forgotten. They think your stillness means they're forgiven. But here's the truth they don't see. Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you're processing. It means you're calculating. It means you've stopped wasting energy trying to explain yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you in the first place. You see, they did what they did in the dark because they thought you wouldn't speak up. They thought your silence meant permission, that you would never have the strength to confront what they buried. But silence is not consent. It's containment. It's control. It's the space where pain turns into fuel, where betrayal turns into clarity, where heartbreak sharpens your vision. And when you rise, not with rage, but with clarity, that's when everything changes. That's when your silence becomes the most deafening sound they'll ever hear. Because they expected you to explode, to beg, to break, but instead you evolved quietly, completely. Silence is not peace until it is chosen. Real peace doesn't come from holding it in, it comes from holding yourself up. It comes when you finally realize you don't need to speak to be heard. You don't need to scream to make a statement. Sometimes your silence is the roar of your strength, the echo of your boundaries, the anthem of your awakening. You don't owe forgiveness to people who never took responsibility for what they did. Let that sink in. You don't owe them your healing, your softness, or your closure. Forgiveness is not some spiritual duty you perform while they continue to walk through life untouched, unbothered, and unchanged. No, that's not forgiveness. That's self-betrayal dressed up as healing. They want your forgiveness without facing their own reflection. They want a clean slate without owning the damage they caused. But real healing doesn't come from pretending you're okay. It comes from standing in the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And the truth is, some people are not sorry. They're not broken. They're not lost. They're calculated. They know what they did. They just don't care enough to change it. So why should you keep carrying the burden of making peace with their destruction? Why should you be the one who bends, breaks, and bleeds for closure they never earned? You're not obligated to forgive people who gaslit your reality, who minimized your pain, who used your loyalty as a weapon. That's not emotional maturity. That's emotional slavery. And you're done being chained to someone else's lack of accountability. You have every right to say, no, I don't forgive you. Not out of hate, but out of respect for yourself, because forgiveness is sacred. It's for the ones who own their actions, who do the work, who show up with sincerity and remorse. It's not a free pass you hand out to people just because time has passed. Time doesn't heal what someone refuses to repair. And here's the kicker, you don't need forgiveness to be free. You don't need to release them to rise. You don't need to pretend they didn't hurt you just so you can move on. You move on when you choose you, when you say, I'm no longer making excuses for the inexcusable. When you finally realize forgiveness without change is just permission for repeat betrayal, and you are no longer available for that pattern. Not now, not ever again. Forgiveness without accountability is not healing. It's self-abandonment. It's you sweeping your own wounds under the rug while the person who cut you keeps walking away with clean hands. And how many times have you done that? How many times have you convinced yourself that forgiveness was necessary just so you could breathe again? But let me tell you, what you needed wasn't forgiveness. What you needed was validation. What you needed was someone to say, yes, that happened. Yes, it hurt. And no, you're not crazy for feeling broken. They want forgiveness without a single ounce of change, no apology, no recognition, no ownership, and they expect you to give it freely just because you're a good person. But being a good person does not mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity to protect someone else's image. You were never meant to be their safe space after they became your storm. Let's be brutally honest. Some people will never understand the pain they caused because they never had to feel it. You did. You carried it. You cried in silence. You questioned your own worth because of their choices. And now they want your forgiveness like it's a transaction, like your healing is something they're entitled to, even though they refuse to earn it. But no more. This is the season where you stop handing out grace to people who still live in denial. This is the chapter where you stop watering dead gardens. If they can't meet you with truth, with humility, with change, then they don't deserve the access that forgiveness grants. Because forgiveness isn't just a word, it's re-entry. It's saying, I trust you not to do it again. And if they haven't grown, then all forgiveness does is invite more pain. You've forgiven too quickly in the past. You've let people back in who showed no remorse. But now you've learned, now you see, now you understand. You are not heartless for withholding forgiveness. You are healing with intention, and that intention is what will finally break the cycle. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, is earned. And if they want it, they can start by becoming the kind of person who deserves it. Until then, your silence, your distance, your boundary, that's your power. What they did does not define you. It defines them. Let that truth hit you in the chest, because too often you take their actions and wear them like they say something about you, like their betrayal is a reflection of your worth, like their silence means you're unlovable, like their disrespect means you're not enough. But that's a lie, a dangerous, toxic lie, and you've believed it for far too long. Listen closely. Their darkness is not yours to carry. Their deception is not your burden. Their choice to hurt you, to lie to you, to manipulate you behind closed doors, that speaks volumes about who they are when no one is watching. That's their soul in motion. That's their character on display. And it's got nothing to do with how kind, loving, or loyal you were. You see, they tried to dim your light because it exposed everything in them they were ashamed of. Your honesty revealed their deceit. Your purity magnified their poison. Your heart terrified them because they knew they couldn't meet you at the level you were operating on. So instead of rising, they sabotaged. Instead of growing, they chose destruction. And now you're left with the mess, but not the guilt. You've got to stop internalizing other people's brokenness. Stop rewriting your story through the lens of their dysfunction. You were never too much. You were never too emotional. You were never too trusting. You were just with someone who was too small to hold what you brought to the table. And that's not your fault. That's their limitation. This is the moment where you reclaim your identity, not based on the way they treated you, but based on the way you rose in spite of it. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after it. Their darkness may have touched you, but it never owned you. You walked through hell, yes, but you came out holding light. You came out wiser, sharper, stronger. Their actions tried to define you, but now your rise will redefine everything. They tried to break you, but what they didn't realize is your value was never in their hands. Their betrayal, their lies, their darkness, those were their truths, not yours. And the moment you stop confusing their behavior with your identity, you become unstoppable. Because here's what they never understood. You were never reacting to them. You were reflecting back what they were too afraid to face in themselves. They couldn't handle your integrity. They couldn't stand your light. Your consistency, your vulnerability, your genuine love, it all forced them to confront how empty they really were on the inside. So what did they do? They hurt you before you could see the truth in them. They attacked the very thing that made you real, because hurting you was easier than healing themselves. But don't you dare carry their shame another step. Don't you dare let what they did in the shadows define the way you see your own worth. Their cruelty, that wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because you were too much for someone who was committed to staying small. You were too honest for their lies, too loyal for their games, too whole for someone who only knew how to love in broken pieces. They didn't reject you. They rejected the mirror you held up, a mirror that showed them everything they were not. So don't let their rejection become your story. Let it become your revelation. You are not what they did. You are not how they left. You are not the silence they gave you, the betrayal they planted, the pain they tried to bury you under. You are what grew from it. You are the one who kept going, who kept loving, who kept building when they expected you to fall apart. Their darkness revealed their truth. Your survival, that revealed yours. And now you rise not because they said you could, but because you finally remembered who you are, without their shadow in your light. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors. Doors that you choose who to let in and who to keep out. And when you finally start setting boundaries, real boundaries, the kind that say no more, you start to reclaim your life one decision at a time. Because here's the truth. Your power doesn't come from being liked, accepted, or understood. Your power comes from being respected. And respect is born in the moment you stop giving people unlimited access to your heart, your time, and your peace just because you used to love them. You were taught to believe that love means tolerance, that kindness means self-sacrifice, that being a good person means letting people back in no matter how many times they violate you. But that's a lie. That's how you get stuck in cycles. That's how you end up drained, depleted, and doubting your own reality while they keep feeding off your silence. But the moment you draw the line, the moment you say, this is not okay, that's when you step into your strength. That's when your healing stops being passive and starts being active. And it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Boundaries can be silent. They can be you not answering the phone. They can be you no longer explaining yourself. They can be you simply walking away from anything that doesn't feel safe, healthy, or honest. And yes, people will get angry. The ones who benefited from your lack of boundaries will say you've changed. And you have. You've grown. You've evolved. And guess what? Growth offends those who refuse to grow with you. Let it offend them. Let it make them uncomfortable. Because your job is not to shrink to fit their comfort zone. Your job is to rise. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They are clarity. They say, I love myself enough to not let this happen again. They say, what happened in the dark will never find its way into my light again. And every time you enforce them, you send a signal to the universe, to yourself, and to anyone watching. I will never abandon myself again just to keep someone else around. This is your power now, and no one takes it without your permission. You've carried their shame long enough, and it's time to put it down, for good. Because here's the raw truth. It was never yours to carry in the first place. You took their betrayal and turned it into self-doubt. You took their manipulation and made it your responsibility. You kept asking yourself, was it me? Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? But you were never the problem. They were just masters at making you feel like you were. That's how people who operate in the dark survive, by projecting their guilt onto the ones they hurt, by shifting the weight so they can walk away free while you carry the emotional debt they created. But let me tell you something. You're done being the landfill for someone else's garbage. You're done absorbing pain that was inflicted on you and then expected to heal silently while they move on unbothered. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them grace. You don't owe them a version of you that pretends it didn't happen. Because every time you carry shame that doesn't belong to you, you bury your own power. You shrink your voice. You delay your healing. And worst of all, you let them win. Not by their strength, but by your silence. But here's what changes everything. And the moment you realize that healing doesn't come from forgiveness alone. Healing comes from returning that shame to the rightful owner. From saying, this was never mine, this is yours. You caused this, you lied, you betrayed, you hurt, and I will not bleed for your choices any longer. Shame kept you in a prison that they walked away from, but now you've got the key. And that key is called truth. The truth that you didn't deserve it. The truth that your heart was real. The truth that their darkness isn't your identity. So today, right now, is the moment you take back every piece of yourself you gave away, trying to be understood by people who never even tried to understand themselves. You were never broken, just burdened. And now that the weight is off, watch yourself rise. Let's go deeper, because this one cuts to the bone. You didn't just carry their shame, you became it. You wore it like armor, thinking it would protect you. You kept replaying what they did, trying to figure out what you missed. You overanalyzed every conversation, every silence, every shift in their tone, hoping to find the moment you failed. But hear this with everything in you. You didn't fail. You were never the villain. You were the one who stayed real in a room full of masks. They didn't just hurt you, they made you question yourself. That's the most dangerous kind of betrayal. Not the kind that just causes pain. The kind that rewires your belief system. The kind that makes you second guess your instincts. That's why it hurt so bad. Because it wasn't just what they did. It's how they made you turn on yourself in the process. And now you've spent all this time trying to recover, trying to be stronger, trying to forgive. But deep down, you're still carrying the guilt they should have owned. You're still holding on to a false belief that if you had just been better, loved harder, stayed quieter, they wouldn't have done what they did. But that's a lie. That's the story they let you write, so they wouldn't have to face their truth. But now the story changes. Now you hand it back. Every ounce of shame, every ounce of guilt, every ounce of responsibility that was never yours, return it. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You take that weight and give it back to the only person who ever deserved to carry it, them. Because carrying their shame has cost you enough. It cost you your peace, your confidence, your clarity. It made you doubt the purity of your own heart. But now you know better. You know their actions were never about you. They were a reflection of the chaos within them. And the moment you stop trying to fix what you never broke is the moment you rise into the version of you they tried to silence. And here's the most powerful part. Once you return that shame, you don't just rise, you become untouchable. Because no one can hold power over a person who knows what isn't theirs to carry. You become rooted, clear, free. And the world starts to see what they never wanted to admit. No, you were never the broken one. You were the light they couldn't handle. You don't need revenge. You don't need to clap back, expose them, or waste another second crafting the perfect comeback. That's not where your power is. Your power is in the rise they never saw coming. Your power is in the peace they can't disrupt anymore. Your power is in becoming the person they secretly feared you'd become if they ever lost control of your mind. They thought you'd fall apart. They thought their betrayal would crush you, and maybe it did. For a while, Maybe you hit rock bottom. Maybe you cried until you couldn't breathe. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid ground. It's where you rebuild. It's where you stop reaching for people who never reached back. And in that silence, in that stillness, you found something they'll never understand: clarity. Clarity that revenge is nothing compared to redirection. Because what's more powerful than revenge? Transformation. Becoming everything they said you couldn't be without them. Thriving without looking back. Growing without needing to prove anything. Success is the most surgical revenge you'll ever serve because it doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from discipline. It comes from focus. It comes from making a decision that says, you will not define the rest of my life. You didn't just survive them, you outgrew them. You stopped playing small to keep their ego intact. You stopped begging to be seen, heard, loved by someone who could barely see themselves. And that decision, that's your justice. You didn't match their energy, you elevated above it. You didn't stoop to their level, you rebuilt the mountain they tried to knock you off. Let them watch. Let them feel what absence really means when it's no longer just silence. It's evolution. You're no longer interested in revenge because your standards have risen too high to reach for anything beneath your healing. They burned the bridge, and you used the fire to light your own path. So walk it boldly, fiercely, without looking back, because they expected destruction, and instead you became unstoppable. You don't remember to stay bitter, you remember to stay aware. You remember so you never forget who they were when they thought you weren't watching. You remember not because you want to live in pain, but because pain taught you the truth, the kind of truth that's too expensive to ignore. People say, just let it go. But letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means learning from it so it never happens again. Your memory is your protection now. It's your filter. It's your built-in radar that whispers, not again. Because when someone shows you their true colors, not in words, but in behavior, in silence, in betrayal, you believe them. You stop making excuses for red flags. You stop confusing emotional damage with destiny. And you stop giving people more chances than they ever earned in the first place. Don't let anyone guilt you into forgetting the very thing that woke you up. That moment, that heartbreak, that betrayal, that lie in the dark, it cracked you open. And yeah, it hurt. But inside that crack was truth. Inside that moment was the version of you that finally stopped tolerating what you once called love. You remember because that pain turned into wisdom, and that wisdom turned into standards. You're not cold for remembering. You're not unforgiving for being cautious. You're smart. You're healed. You're awake now. And awareness is not negativity. It's power. You remember because you love yourself enough to never hand your heart to someone who doesn't know how to hold it. You remember because you've outgrown the illusion that everyone deserves a second chance just because they want it. Your memory is not your prison. It's your protection. It's not about revenge. It's not about obsession. It's about respect for what you survived, for what you learned, and for who you've become. And if they call that unforgiving, let them. You're not here to be understood by people who never tried to understand you. You're here to rise, and that rise began the day you stopped forgetting what they did in the dark. Don't let anyone tell you that remembering is a weakness. Don't let anyone convince you that in order to heal, you have to forget. That's not healing. That's erasing. That's rewriting history to make others feel more comfortable with what they did. And you weren't put through hell just to pretend it never happened. No, you remember because it mattered, because it changed you, because it shaped you. They want you to forget so they can stay unaccountable, so they don't have to face the reflection of what they did. But your memory is not for them. It's for you. It's your shield. It's your compass. It's your declaration to the world. I see clearly now, and I will never be blind again. Because forgetting might make them feel better, but it makes you vulnerable again. And you've come too far to walk back into the fire you crawled out of. You're not holding a grudge, you're holding standards. You're not bitter, you're boundaried. That's a big difference. Because remembering doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It means you finally understand it. It means you're no longer controlled by it. It means you've taken your power back from the people who tried to steal it in silence. And don't confuse forgiveness with amnesia. You can let go of the pain and still remember the lesson. You can move forward and still know who not to trust again. You don't owe anyone a blank slate when they've done nothing to repaint the picture, because they painted that moment in the dark with your trust, your love, your vulnerability. and they burned it. So, no, you don't forget. You evolve, you get sharper, you grow eyes in the back of your heart. You become the version of yourself who no longer asks, why did they do that? And starts declaring, they'll never get a second chance too. Remembering is power. Remembering is how you protect your peace. It's how you recognize patterns before they repeat. It's how you guard your spirit from those who only show up to take from it. So remember, fully, clearly, boldly, because your memory isn't what's holding you back. It's what's keeping you free. You are the author now, not them, not the past, not the pain. You, the moment you stopped waiting for an apology, the moment you stopped hoping they'd change, the moment you realized closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you, that was the moment your story truly began. Because what they did in the dark, that was one chapter, but it's not the whole book. It's not your title. It's not your identity. It's a scar, not a sentence. You spent so long letting them hold the pen, letting their actions write the narrative of your worth. You let the betrayal, the silence, the manipulation scribble lies into the story of your soul. Lies like you weren't enough, like you were too much, like you were hard to love. But now, the pen is back in your hand, and this time the ink is made of truth. You don't need their validation to move forward. You don't need their recognition to reclaim your value. You are writing a new chapter, and this one is fierce. This one is grounded. This one says, I no longer seek love from those who broke me. I no longer chase people who couldn't even face themselves. I choose me. And let's be clear, choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's how you protect your light. It's how you stop editing yourself just to be readable to people who never had the depth to understand you in the first place. You are not their victim. You are not their afterthought. You are the plot twist they didn't see coming. They tried to reduce you to your lowest moment, but you're about to show the world what happens when a storm learns how to walk. So write boldly, speak loudly, live fully, because this is your story now, and no one gets to hold the pen unless they've earned a place in the pages. What they did in the dark was meant to break you, but all it did was show you who you really are. The author, the force, the fire, the future. This is your moment, not to forget, not to forgive what was never earned, but to finally be free, free from the weight of their choices, free from the lies you told yourself just to make sense of the pain, free from the shame that was never yours to carry. You are not broken. You are not bitter. You are becoming. What they did in the dark may have cracked something inside you, but it didn't kill your light. It ignited it. And now you're no longer hiding in the shadows of their decisions. You're standing in the fire of your own truth. No more second chances to people who never took the first one seriously. No more rewriting your story just to make villains look innocent. No more spiritual bypassing. No more fake forgiveness. No more silence that protects their image while destroying your spirit. That chapter is closed. The door is locked. The key is in your hands now. You didn't come this far to hand your power back to the ones who abused it. You came this far to reclaim it, to build from it, to rise with it. And that rise, your rise, will be louder, bolder, and brighter than anything they ever did in the dark. Because now you know exactly who you are. Not their victim, not their memory, not their regret, but your own revolution.